Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another F1 22 gameplay video. Big thanks to EA and Codemasters for giving me this opportunity, and today we're going to be going over all the track changes in this new game. As you can see, turns 1 and 2 at Australia, very different. It's opened up significantly. You can carry a bunch more speed through there. The track is very much wider. There's also a bit more width to turn 3, and the curb on the inside has been reprofiled along with its branding. No sausage curb on the outside of turn 4. Turn 5 is pretty narrow as it's always been. Turn 6 incredibly opened up. You can carry way more speed, and then it flows into this high speed section which used to be a braking zone into a chicane, but now has been transformed into a part of the track that is pretty much flat out all the way to the point of turns 11 and turns 12. You have to brake harder here because you're carrying way more speed, and these curves on the inside and outside of turn 12 is a lot more forgiving to the way they were profiled in the previous year's game. Turn 13 feels a lot more extended, turned into a sort of 90-degree corner almost, which opens up the opportunity for overtaking. Approach to turn 14 slightly widened up. Turn 15 inside curb has been reprofiled and it's a lot more wider than it was last year, and the final corner also has a lot more change to it compared to last year. It's a lot wider. Now we're going to jump into Abu Dhabi. We're doing the first 3 tracks with the most changes first, of course. Here we have turns 1, 2, 3 and 4 not having a whole lot of difference, but instead of going through the chicane at the bottom of this hill, we'll be going straight through it, and that turns into a wide hairpin, which is a prime overtaking spot, especially against the AI. I haven't quite really mastered or figured out yet what the optimal racing line through there at this point of driving, but I did 100% race later and I'm a bit more comfortable with driving through there now that I've learned it. But yeah, heading into the chicane, this is another great place for overtaking. Not a whole lot of change. You might be carrying slightly more speed considering you're coming out of a faster hairpin compared to last year. The entry into turn 9, you can carry a whole bunch of speed here. Once again, unsure on the exact racing line whether you do a double apex here. Hit the apex early and let the car slide out wide, or if you hold the inside line for longer than what I did during this video. Also another prime overtaking opportunity. Heading into turns 12 and 13, totally reprofiled. A lot of negative camber heading into these 2 corners, consecutive corners with opposite camber to what you want turning in. This corner now flat out, no need to brake or downshift. And the final corner pretty much remaining the same to conclude this lap around Abu Dhabi. So about 5 corners that have been majorly changed to mimic real life. Now heading into Spain, completing the top 3 tracks with the most changes. We've got some inside sausage curbs for turns 1 and 2. It'll unsettle the car if you hit those too hard, or if you're on a softer suspension, I think you might get away with collecting those curbs. Heading into turn 4 now, the car suits these type of corners because of the ground effect. It's something that doesn't feel slower than last year in comparison to the performance in slow speed corners. We've got some inside sausage curbs on turn 5 and some serrated exit curbs on the exit of turn 5. Turn 7 and 8 curbing has been totally reprofiled. You can see that new yellow sausage curb on the inside of turn 8. And so going through turn 9, a little tiny sausage curb added to the inside, and on the exit of turn 9, some serrated curbs, which leads us into the new profiled corner being turn 10. I still don't really fully understand the racing line through here, so don't take this as a flying lap. There's some sausage curbs on the inside of turn 12, which leads us to the final chicane section where we have a long yellow curb on the outside of turn 13 and also on the exit of turn 15 as well. And last but not least, there's additional curbing on the outside of the final corner here in Spain to complete the lap. Bahrain, I pretty much found absolutely no difference. There was even minimal difference in the sponsorship boards and changes of color. But in Saudi Arabia, we've got some green curbs now. On the inside of turn 1, there's an orange curb that didn't exist before, and I think they've just fleshed this whole place out a whole lot more with color. As you can see, the Pirelli signs on the walls, they weren't there before, and there's just a whole lot more vibrance to the circuit that wasn't here in the previous generation of the game. This inside wall on the right used to be blank, but now it's got some red Saudi sponsorship on it. This whole section of the track is sponsored by Aramco, whereas before it used to be blank until you reached this long left-hander. And also the outside is now blue for the runoff area, where it used to be just plain tarmac Once again, where the red curbs used to be, there's green curbs, and there's some Rolex sponsorship on the inside of turn 17. There's a whole bunch of corners in this track, I just realized. And once again, the Rolex and the F1 sponsorship on the sidewalls are just replacing what used to be blank. And same with the Liquid Moly, that's all new sponsorship here. And not a whole lot of difference to actual physical changes, just a lot of sponsorship changes. The change of color to the curbs going from red to green, and the inside of turn 1 having a chunky orange curb, which didn't used to be there before. This final corner didn't really feel like it was extended, it just feels the exact same as last year. And I think all this purple sponsorship was mostly there from last year as well. We're going to move on to Monaco now, where the inside of turn 1 pavement seems to be a bit more faded than last year, and that concrete apron in the middle of the chicane after the tunnel is a lot more faded and not just tarmac color compared to last year. Moving on to Azerbaijan, not really any physical changes to Azerbaijan, just a lot of sponsorship, branding and color changes to the signs. The curb on the outside of turn 3 has had its length reduced. There's not a whole lot of difference to the castle section apart from that blue bit on the inside, which has been recolored, and the inside of turn 15 now has some black Pirelli sponsorship that wasn't there in the previous year. Now moving on to Canada, which had pretty much no changes at all. I really couldn't find anything different about Canada, so if you guys find something that I didn't, be sure to let me know. France was pretty much the exact same as well. I couldn't really find anything different about France apart from some of the sponsorship being changed up in this part of the circuit where it's now sponsored by Workday. Other than that, I think the blue might have become a lighter colored blue, and also there's some color on the outside of this long right hander that was just originally some of those blue lines before. If you're wondering why I'm cutting down these videos, it's because I have to fit it into 15 minutes somehow. Now moving on to Hungary, the inside of turn 1 is no longer blue. It used to be blue on the previous game. The underpass signs changed from Rolex to F122, and the outside of the runoff area in turn 2 is also changed from Rolex to Pirelli. All the signs that you can see here that are Pirelli used to be Rolex, so they've all changed. There's pretty much no physical changes that I can see. They added a mini drain on the exit of turn 5. Just the sponsorship around this area has now been changed to Crypto.com sponsorship, and also the Rolex sponsorship on the outsides of the track that you can see have also changed. And the DHL area, there's basically no physical changes. The red on the inside curb for the final corner is a bit more faded from its original red color, and that's about it. Moving on to Spa now, I really wanted there to be changes, but there's like basically absolutely no changes to Spa. I was pretty disappointed. I really wanted changes to Spa because it's probably the most inaccurate track compared to most of the others. There's some sponsorship changes, but I really wanted some physical changes. The outside of turn 5, all that tarmac has been painted blue for the sponsorship of Aramco, but in terms of physical changes to the track, there is really not much to talk about here, unfortunately. This corner is actually a bit easier to take, I think, with this year's cars, so that's something to take away from this, I think. But yeah, some changes are much overdue for this circuit. If you're wondering, we're not going to be covering the tracks that we've already covered in previous gameplay videos, so this includes Austria, Britain, Texas, Imola, and Miami, of course, being a new track, not having any changes because it's the first time being released in an F1 game. And I think most of you would prefer me covering the new stuff anyways that you haven't seen yet, rather than go over things you've already seen in the past from other gameplay videos. Bus stop chicane inside curbs have actually changed from orange to red. That's pretty much the only change I could find, apart from the AstroTurf on the outside of the final corner being shorter and a brighter green color. Moving on to Netherlands now, something to talk about. We've got some orange curbs. Long-awaited orange curves because that now mimics real life. It probably should have been introduced a while ago. We've got some sponsorship changes to the boards. Not a whole lot different, but the curves can be seen across the whole track to be changed from red to orange. There's also some other colors at the end of the curves to represent the Dutch flag, of course. The brake marker boards on the left-hand side here have been changed to the new Pirelli signs. Once again, not a whole lot of physical changes to the track. You wouldn't expect it as it's one of the newer tracks that have been added by Codemasters to the game, so it is pretty fresh. There's some new Liquid Moly sponsorship on the outside of turn 10 and heading into the braking zone of turn 11, which is the hairpin. You can see in the runoff area it's now sponsored by BWT, and some more F1 signs on the outside of turn 12 that used to be Rolex signs, I believe. in the previous year's game. I only really saw one more branding change, and that was the inside of this corner now changing to Rolex, where it just used to be an F1 sign that was on the ground before. And that's going to wrap up the Netherlands track. Not a whole lot different in terms of physical changes, but just a lot of branding changes. Now we're on to Monza. Brake marker boards on the outside of turn 1 have changed to the Pirelli signs, and the inside turf is changed to black to be branded by Pirelli. There's now DHL signs instead of Pirelli signs heading into turn 3. Turn 4 on the outside, the wall's now sponsored by BWT, as well as the ground on the inside of the chicane. I could not see any physical changes to the curbing or the chicane itself. We got some Crypto.com sponsorship on the outside of the two Lesmos. That wasn't there last year. It used to be Fly Emirates signs. Heading into the Ascari chicane, there wasn't a whole lot of difference that I could see from this point onwards, apart from the liquid moly changes heading down the back straight here into Parabolica. That's the only real changes that I could see, as well as the workday overpass here. No physical changes that would make you drive the track differently to the way you were in the previous year's game. So yeah, for the tracks that don't have that many changes, I'm going to be cutting them up slightly just so that it doesn't waste a bunch of time covering things that basically have no changes at all. For Singapore, I'd say that the outside of turn 1 yellow is a bit more faded now. Apart from that, I really could not see many sponsorship changes or physical changes at all. This track didn't receive much love this year. There was actually one physical change that I will note, and I'll show you a bit later on when you're going through an underpass in Sector 3. But apart from that, I really couldn't spot any physical changes, and there wasn't really many changes to the sponsorships. And I think most of the attention on this game has gone towards Abu Dhabi, Spain, and also Australia, making those big changes, which you'll definitely find much more satisfying to drive. Abu Dhabi and Australia are definitely a lot more fast and flowing to drive and a lot more fun. The Crypto.com sponsorships are new for this section of the track. That's about it. And here's the one physical change on the inside curb here. For turn 17, it starts out flat and then becomes elevated. So if you're riding over the top of the curb, you will eventually beach the car if you don't eventually get off the curb before it becomes elevated. That's the only physical change that I could spot. Let me know once again in the comments section below if you find any different changes in the track that I haven't covered in this video. Japan actually has a few cosmetic changes. As you can see, the metal frame above the track where the sponsorships would usually go now just blank frames. You can just see the metal frame with that, the billboard in front of it. The middle part of the serrated curb is now a fluoro green color, where it used to be just a normal green color that you can see on the outside of the serrated curb. So that's a slight paint change to the curbs. The boards on the outside of the S section are now sponsored by BWT instead of liquid moly. The S section overall is a lot more forgiving. When you touch the curb, you won't spin out as easily. And I couldn't really spot any physical changes apart from the overpass not having a Fly Emirates sponsorship anymore. It's just a plain tunnel basically that you go under. No real changes to the hairpin, and once again, I'm only pretty much covering cosmetic changes for this track, as are many others. Once again, you can see the metal frames that you go under that just don't have any sponsorships on them anymore. Before I get comments about this below, the Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari and Williams haven't been updated yet. They're still the original model that Codemasters builds off. They will be updated before the game is released. These are not the final car models, so they all look the same. That's nothing new. It's been like that in several games past. Every other car though that I haven't mentioned has been slightly updated, although they're still not the final car models. They'll be updated in the future as well. For example, the Aston Martin is currently the spec that it used before it changed to the Red Bull style. Moving on to Mexico now. The AstroTurf on the outside of turn 1 is now a more faded green color. There's also some white branding on the ground beyond the AstroTurf on the outside of turn 1 as well. That wasn't there in the previous year's game. But so far there's been no physical changes. I don't think there are any physical changes for the Mexico track, unfortunately. There's some more Rolex sponsorship on the ground for the runoff of turn 4, and the faded green AstroTurf continues for the turns 4, 5, 6 complex that you can see on the outside of the curb. This section of the track is sponsored by Crypto.com, which is also new. And once again, that faded green AstroTurf wraps around the outside of the track, which used to be a darker green color. The arrows on the board for when you run off the track and you go through the chicane when you have to return back on the track, they have slightly different arrows. Inside of this Apex is now sponsored by Pirelli, where it just used to be a blank green AstroTurf before. And the white sponsorship that's on the ground that you can see through the stadium section used to be painted black in the previous year's game as well. To wrap it up, there's some Fly Emirates sponsorship on the outside of the circuit. But that is about it. Now we're going to move on to Brazil, where there's some fluoro AstroTurf changes where it just used to be a dark green. You can clearly see that it's a brighter fluorescent color. And as we're heading into turn 4, you can see there's boards on the sides of the track that weren't there originally. I think they're for Crypto.com. And yeah, once again, most of the changes you're going to see is just the fluoro AstroTurf. That's most of it for Brazil. The Pirelli signs on the outside of the track have now been replaced by DHL signs, and there's some more purple sponsorship on the outside of turn 7. There's some extra Rolex sponsorship to the outside of turn 11 and some Liqui Moly sponsorship on the final corner. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Be sure to leave a like if you do enjoy the video and want to see some more F1 22 content. If this does reach 3,000 likes, I will release another video immediately. And enjoy the rest of the lap with the Alpine Renault power unit sound.